So we haven't done a panel like this before, but I thought it'd be really good to do a panel based on careers that move through the industry and how to move through the industry. I'm Oliver Stapleton. I am still a cinematographer just, but I also teach 3 days a week at the NFTS, National Film School. And so I'm going to just ask each member of the panel to introduce themselves, and the sound department has reminded us not to do that. So please hold your microphones at a suitable distance from your face, and you have to pass them around. So maybe start that end, yeah.
Oh, I get to start, okay. My name's Zambarloukos. I'm a cinematographer, I guess. How did I start? I would say I came through the film school route. I come from a very small island, Cyprus. We don't have a film industry, really. The way you actually get ahead for us is primarily through being an academic. So I would say that's the route that allowed me to discover and learn what I wanted to do. I still went through kind of some a bit of ACing, a little bit of gripping, a little bit of gaffing as I went along as a student, mainly to make money. But my route was really to try and get a place in a decent educational institution. And I went to St. Martin's School of Art here, and then I went to the American Film Institute and got an MFA in cinematography there. I didn't think that was enough either. So I interned for Conrad Hall when I graduated. I was very lucky to do that. And then I started my route really working on small, low-budget, independent films and trying to find a route to telling good stories.
Thanks. Okay, Larry.
Hi, I'm Larry Prinz. I'm a gaffer. My route into the industry, or my route, I'm a Yank, was very convoluted. I went to university in Los Angeles, grew up in Burbank, within a mile of 5 major studios. It never occurred to me to work in the film industry, even though it was literally right on my doorstep. And so after university, I went traveling, ended up on a kibbutz in Israel, and then when I had enough of that, went down to Eilat to make some money to travel through Europe, and then I'd go back and carry on with studies. While in Eilat, I, by chance, met an American producer who was doing a little film with a British crew. Made friends with a gaffer who was Ronnie Pierce from Lee Lighting. This is in the 70s. And he took me under his wing, taught me a few things. And when he left, he said, if you ever want a job in London, come and see me. So at that point, the first few jobs I worked on was the most fun I've ever had. And I mainly studied oceanography and discovered I get terribly seasick. So not a great path. So I really enjoyed it. Stayed for another year working with an Israeli gaffer. Came to London expecting nothing. And I thought, well, if Ron doesn't give me a hand, I'll go back to LA where I grew up and the industry is all over. And true to his word, he gave me a job, a work permit, a visa. I apprenticed at Lee Lighting for about 2 years, 2.5 years, went traveling again, and decided I wanted to get back to London. So I've been here more or less ever since the late 70s, and it's been a progression up through the ranks, sparking, gaffing. I was a terrible best boy, so I went straight into gaffing. I was a terrible gaffer as well at first. And here I am now. I still love London. I love the British industry, and I think it's a fantastic place to work and get experience.
I'm Kees van Oostrum. I'm a cinematographer. I was born and raised in Holland, and obviously when I was 18 years old, I went to the Dutch Film School for 4 years and enjoyed that very much, but thought that I wanted to expand my horizons, so I got a scholarship to go to the American Film Institute as well. Spent about 2.5 years there at the time because it was the first year, the second year, and you were making a movie and you ended up spending a lot of time there. really enjoyed that. I think we're going to talk about film schools later a little bit more. But after that, my career, I wasn't going to be an assistant because I really didn't know how to do that. So I started to do odd little jobs for about a year, and then through documentaries, 2 years later, I shot my first dramatic film, and it kept on going till today. So that's sort of how I rolled into it. I call myself a product of film schools, which is good and bad, as you know. But that's how it is. And I understand people that climb up the ladder by being assistants and slowly moving your way up, which is a way to do it as well. And sometimes I'm envious of those people because they know a lot more than I do about certain things. But looking back, I don't regret what I did.
Hi, I'm Chloë Thomson. I'm a cinematographer, and I guess I grew up with a dad he's retired now, but he was an editor, so film was always in the family. And he totally persuaded me against the film industry. He said, you work really hard, it's really sexist, you don't want to do that. And I eventually tried loads of different things until I decided I did want to do that. And I started training, so I trained for about 3.5 years. And then was inspired by a fellow female DP, Vanessa White, to apply to the National Film and Television School. Don't know how, but got in and spent 2 years there under Brian Tofano and Stuart Harris, and graduated in 2012. And that was amazing for me because I didn't know how to use a light meter, couldn't put up a flag, hadn't shot anything really, just made a little film to get in and learn like this. And made really good relationships with directors there, particularly one who I did my grad film with and have been working with ever since. And I feel like I'm very much at the beginning of my career, and yeah, a lot to learn still.
Hello, my name's Louise Ben-Nathan. I've been a second assistant camera for about 20 years. I love it. I never really wanted to move up, so I quite enjoy just working at my level. I focus pulled a little bit. I decided at 16 that I wanted to work in the film industry. I was trying to work out what I wanted to do, and I realized I like watching television. It was as simple as that, so I thought I'd work in it. I wrote off to people, did lots of work experience at the BBC, and when I was at the BBC, I then got as many business cards as I could and hassled them and wrote to them and got more work experience. I went to film school in Southampton, which was a purely practical film degree. Everything was theoretical. Left there, worked for a production company for 1.5 years, and then wrote letters to as many people as I could, and I was very lucky that one of them was Sean Bobbitt, who was about to shoot a job, and I went for an interview in a pub with him and the production manager, and they offered me my first job as a camera trainee, and from there I'd got my foot in the industry, and I just carried on working and have been doing that ever since.
My name's Lucy Bristow. I'm a camera operator on feature films and TV dramas. I started out in the mid-80s when I'd left art school. I originally went to art school, and it was around the time when Channel 4 was setting up, and it was the sort of early wave of question marks about the lack of diversity in the film industry and the sort of nepotism that was really the most common way to get in. You'd get into the industry if you had an uncle or a father, but really other than that it was very, very difficult in those days. So the then film union that was called the ACTT set up a program, a 2-year training scheme with the specific aim of increasing the diversity in the film industry. They had huge numbers of applicants, but I was very lucky to get on to that and was very clear from the beginning I wanted to go into the camera department. So at the end of 2 years on that, you were spat out into the industry as a clapper loader. But during those 2 years, I'd been supernumerary on crews. I'd met lots of crews. I'd made tea for enormous numbers of people. I'd kind of seen how it all worked, and I'd made a few connections, and that was my way on to my first job. It was a great training scheme that carried on for about 21 years, but is no longer happening. But anyway, I then met cameramen like Roger Pratt, Dick Pope, both of whom at that time were working, well, Dick still works with Mike Leigh. I've done lots of work on films with Dick, and then in the early days I worked with people like Nick Noland as well, all of whom were incredibly helpful, very, giving me breaks, as it were, to climb up the ladder. So I spent, I guess, 4 years clapper loading, as it then was, and then I spent about 8 years focus pulling, and then since 2000 I've been camera operating, worked with Harris not long ago, so yeah, so here we are.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrei Austin, and I'm a camera and Steadicam operator in mostly TV, drama, and film these days. But my path started with my father, actually. He wasn't in the film industry, but he was a very good amateur photographer, and he had this 2¼ square film camera that we used to take photos with and get them processed, and I would marvel at these incredible square, black and white, sometimes in colour negs. And I decided at a young age that I wanted to be a photographer, or the extension of that, go into film and television. Cut to 18 years of age, after I'd studied my A-levels, I went to my careers teacher and I said, look, I want to go into film and television. And they handed me an application form to the local ball bearing factory. And yeah, that's true, by the way. So I decided, okay, well, they can't really help me. So I freelanced in the industry in local companies that were doing videos and what have you. And my sister saw an advert for cameramen, trainee cameramen at the BBC. So I thought, that's what I want to do. I'll apply. And by then I'd got qualifications in electronics, digital communications, etc. So I applied. And back in them days, they used to have thousands of people respond to the advert. So I think there was 17,000 that responded to the same advert that I wrote to. But I went through the series of 3 interviews that they used to do at the BBC then, and became a trainee camera operator. This was in television, so I found myself several months later in television studios in London at the BBC. And it was a fantastic training ground, because it taught you everything you need, everything about television camera work. You did everything. You swung the cranes, you moved the PEDs, you did the focus, you did the composition. You worked on sometimes big, enormous crews, sometimes small crews, documentaries. I was in the BBC for 13 years, and in those 13 years I've done 2 Olympic Games, I've done any number of football matches, rugby matches, at the Cardiff Arms Park, Nigel, as well as Twickenham. I've done documentaries. I've been down in the Channel Tunnel. I've shot the Royal Family, not literally, by the way. I filmed the Royal Family. I've worked in 15 different countries, and it was a really good grounding in the industry. Whilst I was there, I went on a Steadicam course, this new gadget, this new gizmo that people were talking about, and it was taught by a very good operator called Ted Churchill, who's no longer with us, and he really inspired me to go freelance. And so from 1997, 2000, that period, I left the BBC and went freelance primarily as a Steadicam operator, but because I had a good grounding in other camera operations as well, I was able to use both of those skills and those techniques to apply my trade as a camera operator.
So what you have learned, I'd imagine, from listening to everybody, is that there's no one way in to this business. Media course, film school, applying to the BBC. I applied, I failed, I'm sorry to say. They didn't let me in, but hey. So I guess I haven't told my story, so I'll just give you a quick one. So I left in '66 1966, I left like a lot of people did for a short time. At the age of 18, I traveled down Africa, but I stayed away 8 years because I became embroiled in various bad activities in Cape Town. And so from the age of 18 to 28, I was pretty much kind of off-grid. It's incredibly unfit, very arty, very involved with lots of very peculiar people, some of whom are still my friends. But when I came back to the UK, I was on the way to Canada because I liked Canadian filmmaking and I hated England at the time. I'm an ex-public school boy, so you can understand why I hate England. But when I came back in '74, I spent 6 months traveling in England with a Greek girl that I bumped into. And I actually fell in love with England for the first time at the age of 27. And it was the most extraordinary transformation. I suddenly realized that England wasn't a bunch of RAF camps and public schools, but actually had other things going for it. And that was an amazing 6 months. It was the summer of '74. And then I stumbled into the NFTS with a friend who had wanted to go there. He said, "Oh, come and look at it, come and look at it." And I literally went along with my friend just to have a look at it. And again, it was like after this revelation of seeing Scotland and Cornwall and Wales and Yorkshire and the whole of our wonderful, amazing country, I suddenly looked at this wonderful, amazing film school with 75 students in it and no course and no degree, and come as long as you like and do what you like. And that was very culturally symptomatic of that time and was perfect for me. So I threw the drugs away, started learning karate and Tai Chi, got super fit, and got as crazy about being fit as I was about smoking pot. And that really changed my life, I have to say, completely. So 28 to 30, 31 I think I was at the Monastery of Film out in Beaconsfield. But I was never in Beaconsfield, I was just in the film school. And then I came out and started shooting, and that was that. So what I'd like to, please in the audience, anytime break in and ask a question. You've got a lot of very different people sitting on this stage, and so it'd be quite good if you do ask a question, direct it to a specific person, would be nice. I'd love you to start breaking in at some point as opposed to waiting for half an hour and then any questions. So put your hand up if you do want to ask something at any time. But so let's just talk a little bit amongst us. So we've got really this going up the ladder, clearly, is a way into the business and always has been. And then now, of course, unlike when I started, there was only a few film schools in the world, and now there's literally thousands and thousands of 16 to 18-year-old college that's just opened in London. You've got media courses all over the place, and then you've got some specialist film schools like the London Film School, National Film School. So I'd just be interested in, interesting how we've sat, right? So we've sat with coming up the trade, that side, and academia and NFTS, this side. So let's talk a bit about the two methods in, and does it matter anymore? Because back in the 70s and 80s, the industry, when people like Roger Deakins emerged and I emerged and the rest of us, they hated us. They didn't want to talk to us. They thought we were jumped up upstarts who couldn't possibly shoot anything. So it'd be good to see 30 years later, 40 years later, has that changed? Is there still prejudice against people who come out of schools? Does it matter in any shape or form? So anybody who wants to talk about that? Nobody?
Yeah, from my point of view, I don't think it matters. I think, where you get your knowledge from is all good. I don't think there's any one place to get knowledge these days. I encourage people to go to shows, exhibitions like this. I try to do research every year normally this time of year, just to educate myself as to what's out there. I mean, most of the time you bump into old friends, to be honest with you, but nevertheless, you know, the more knowledge and you can get from anywhere, the better. I mean, on one occasion I jumped on a plane to LA for a weekend just to meet somebody, and I bumped into Howard Preston, you know, who had just invented this new gizmo for focus pulling wirelessly, you know, and I see Howard is out there now. I said hello to him. So, you know, acquiring that knowledge doesn't really require you necessarily to go to film school. If you're at film school and you get to film school and you can pick up the knowledge in an academic environment, great, you know. But if you've picked up the knowledge from going out and shooting yourself, great. You know, I don't think there's any one route these days.
The only thing that I've always thought is that it's immensely helpful for a DP to have a very thorough understanding of everybody's roles in the camera department. And obviously if you've climbed up the ladder, you have a very strong grounding in all those different roles, so you have that understanding. And I've always thought that's an advantage to me, I've always felt, but I haven't come at it from the other end of actually ending up on a set where you're working with people who've been focus pulling for 20 years and know it inside out. And, you know, I'd be interested to hear how that feels from the other side in a way.
I mean, I would say that for me, going to film school was completely invaluable. And I think if I hadn't have done that, as I say, I graduated 8 years ago. I think I'd probably still be loading. I never wanted to focus pull. And I think I would have got sort of swept up. I was working on relatively big films and TV dramas and working with lovely crew who are very loyal. And I think the combination of working on quite big sets, on big features and big TV dramas for a few years and then going to film school meant that I had the knowledge of how all departments work and the respect for each member of crew, both in the camera and lighting departments and grip, but across the board, which then helped when I was at NFTS. But when I got there, I really knew nothing about lighting, because when you're busy making sure that everyone's got good teas and coffees and all the bags are in order and the mag liners are clean and, et cetera, you can't really look at what the DP is doing. And when I did have a moment to do that, I didn't really, there are lights and flags and machines everywhere, and you think, how on earth did they get there? And actually the answer is you just put one thing up, and then you put another thing up, and then you probably turn most of it off. But, I think it's so practical, the NFTS, that I think you get DPs coming in who are working in the industry, who all light in a different way, who all have a different eye, and for me it's not really about equipment. And I know that's probably a slightly controversial thing to say at a trade show, but for me it's about storytelling, and I think particularly the NFTS is really brilliant at that. And there's always someone to call if you know the image that you want in order to tell the story that's based on the script, that's trying to achieve your director's vision. You can always call somebody and say, how do I get the camera from there to there? Or how do I make these lights move? Or how do I get that effect? And you can find out from a technical point of view with a phone call. Whereas the training that you get at NFTS certainly was about trying to get from the page into the director's vision, and then something as better than the director imagined in the first place. And for me, it was unparalleled. I couldn't have done that any other way, I don't think.
This isn't an advert for the NFTS, by the way, just in case you're getting worried.
Interesting. It brought me back to my beginnings. When I went to film school being a director. And the first year, you had to do everything together. You got a roll of film at the time, 16 millimeter. To shoot a little movie every week or do an exercise. And a couple of weeks in a row, the ball went around, says, yo, are you the director, you're the sound man, and who's going to be the cameraman? And nobody wanted to do it because it had to do with lighting, and everybody was extremely afraid of it. And I thought at one point, now let me try this out, right? Why not? And that happened more than once, twice, 3 times, and by the end of the year, I had become a cinematographer. I was no longer a director fellow. But what it describes for me is that there is an enormous threshold, I understand, when you become a cameraman, and especially the lighting is a daunting thing. I mean, anybody can kind of look to a finder and set a shot, but then it comes to lighting, and it's something that's very hard to learn. I mean, you can observe, you can see other people do it, and you can try to monkey that, and you're not very successful at that probably. But what you really need to do, I think, is you just pick up a light, and you turn it on, and you take a look, and you say, this looks good, this looks bad, and you move on from there, slowly but surely, and, you know, eventually you'll have to deal with a lot of light. But a lot of light is the same as dealing with one light, in my mind. I mean, you have a vision, whether it's small or whether it's big, you just go for it. And I think that's the advice I can give you, is to just start doing it and start looking. Don't ever forget to look at what you do, because the moment you do that, then you're lost, and then it becomes terrible. But just do it, and it will fall into place, at least in my way.
So I guess we've ascertained that there is no one route into the film industry. And yes, in the 70s and before, it was nepotism that you almost had to have, or a huge amount of luck. In my case, it was luck. I met a guy who got me in. But it was so difficult. But then back then, you had the BBC, which, you know, to me, from what I understand, it was the greatest training ground ever. You had a chance to move up a department, to change departments entirely. They taught you so well, and that no longer is the case. So film schools, mercifully, have come to take up that slack. But, you know, it is a case. Lighting, at some point, initially, is a process. You know, you look at the set, you see, oh, is there any natural light coming in? Do I want to enhance that? Do I want to block it? What sort of look am I after? Does the director want something special? You just work it through your mind. In my case, when I'm working out you know, how to light a set, you know, I will obviously have had lots of discussions with the DP, and then you wander around and start thinking, right, I'll put a light there, then you work backwards, you know. So for that, maybe keep it off of the wall, add another light over here, keep that, do a top chop. It's a process, and in the end, to my mind, if it looks good to your eye, it probably is. So, you know, I would say to young cinematographers and people aspiring to trust your eye, trust yourself, watch what other people do. As a gaffer, I'm very lucky. I've been able to see 100 DPs, how they work, how they approach a problem, how they light. And it all goes up here. And then at some point, you're faced with a situation and you trawl through your memory, and up comes a possible solution that you've experienced. Well, that worked well 3 years ago. Let's try it here. So it's all what looks good to you probably is. And have that confidence. Don't be afraid to ask anybody. Ask your gaffer. And, you know, in the old days, the lighting department were a breed unto themselves. Now we are actually part of the world of humanity, and we're quite happy to, or at least I am, quite happy to impart any experience and knowledge we have. You know, it's in our interest. If you look good, we look good, everybody's happy, you get the next job, you enjoy what you're doing, enjoy it.
I guess maybe what I wanted to add to that is that for me, the process of learning something is a very, very immersive process. And you need to find a way where you can immerse yourself in your craft. I spent my childhood basically just drawing and drawing and windsurfing and windsurfing. And that's all I did. And then film school for me was fantastic because that's all I did. You know, I never missed a minute. I borrowed every camera, shot every director's film. And I practiced and practiced. I don't even know how much I shot as a student. And then from when I've graduated, I think just in feet of film, I think it's somewhere in the region of 30 million feet of film. Now, that's the kind of practice you need. That's the kind of immersion you need in this craft to do it well. So anything that facilitates that kind of that a passionate kind of dive into the process is going to be a useful way for you to learn anything.
I'm
How's
gonna.
your surfing?
For an old man, I'm okay.
I'm gonna come in. It's interesting to listen to all of this because working as a second AC, my job is not creative at all, and it's what I wanted to do. And it's very technical, and I've enjoyed that. So, in terms of listening to this, if you want to be very creative, go to an amazing film school. But if you want to be an assistant, I think there's two sides to this coin. You can be amazingly brilliant at what you do, but at the end of the day, I think you have to be able to sell yourself, be it through various different means, a CV, and I teach the assistant camera course at the NFTS at the moment. And what I would say to all of you, if I say one thing, which is what I say to my students, is don't ever be afraid to hear the word no, because you'll hear it a lot, but sometimes if you ask a question, you might just hear the word yes. And then doors open for you. So write lots of letters, make as many contacts as you can, and politely ask for people that you think can get you where you want to go, and hope that one of those people you ask might actually be able to say yes and open some doors for you. So please have that confidence to do that.
There was, when I started out in the 80s, I always remember I used to crew up, I didn't know anyone in the business, so slowly over the first 2 years I started getting crew, and the ones who said, I remember some operators sometimes on commercials would say, it's one of those, Gov, and I would never work with them again. That was like one day and then they were gone, because for me there's never such thing as it's one of those. But that was the kind of sarcastic way of saying, fuck off, basically. But the other thing that was amazing, there was a man whose name I can't remember now, but he was a 70-year-old film loader. And I used this guy for years. He was absolutely fantastic. And I asked him one day, when I'd worked with him for some time, I said, why are you still a loader? There he was, like my age now. And he said, because I love it. And I thought, well, that's a really good answer. So sometimes people find, a job in the movies that's not fancy. They're not a director, a DP, whatever. They find Lou likes being a second AC, right? She doesn't want to be a focus puller, I don't think. No, she doesn't.
So hiding to nothing.
Yeah. So it's really great. And the crews I've worked with over the years, and I'm sure Harris and Kees, and if you find the operators who really love operating, the focus pullers who love focus pulling, the seconds who love to be seconds, you have a great crew. These are the people you love to work with. The people who are tricky to work with are like operators who want to be DPs. That can be quite problematic unless they've got their head straight, because they basically pissed off with you every day because you're the DP and they're not. That's not a great person to work with. So it's like each person in the trade. I don't know who's in here or what kind of jobs you do, but you sometimes are looking at a job as a stepping stone, and then sometimes you're on the stone that you actually want to stay on. And knowing when that is important. I was bugged my entire life by, maybe I should be a director. And it really upset my career badly for a long time in the first 15 years, because this little voice was going, you should be a director. So I get out of bed in the morning. I wasn't like a good DP. I was a failed director. But getting those voices out of your head is really useful and a great thing, because then you're going to focus on what you really want. So what I want to do now is move along a bit, because I'm intrigued. Let's imagine we've all got into the business, okay? So you're in the business. Now, who in this room emails CVs to companies without actually going there? Just put your hand up. Do you send CVs off to companies? So not that many, right? So does that mean all the rest of you never send your CV anywhere? No? Yes? So what I'm asking is posting, because you know when our grads leave, they say, well, now what? Now I personally think that like cold sending email CV attachment to like companies is not very useful. But so I'd like to move on a bit to talk about Instagram. Is Instagram as like, is it getting employment for people? I mean, is there anyone in the audience who got a job because they're on Instagram? Okay. Oh. So a lot more than CVs, right? So, because Instagram I know nothing about, so I'd be interested in somebody, perhaps this gentleman who first put his hand up there. Could you tell us a bit about why you think Instagram's important or interesting or gets you work? I think it's this gentleman with the glasses, just here. It's 4 rows back. There you go. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think the first barrier is familiarity. People want to know your name. People want to have heard your name. And I think Instagram is just a platform where people can hear about each other, see each other, kind of know what things people are working on without knowing them. And it provides an initial kind of familiarity, which is really useful to then getting work. It's often not the sole component, but it's a very important component.
So I see 3 kinds of Instagram, right? I see Danny Mindell taking shots of Panavision lenses, which I never understand why it gets like 7,000 people looking at that. I just don't, what is that? Anyway, so I like Danny, by the way, he's a friend. So, but then I see pictures of people's kids, and I don't know what that's about. And then sometimes you see great photographs, really good stills, right? So what's the deal? You know, what would your advice be to Instagram, what you should do? Is somebody from the audience want to speak on that? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniela. I think the benefits of using Instagram is that you can get a lot more up and personal and more. It's not just about, you know, other than showing your work and demonstrating, you know, your art and your profession. You know, you're also finding out a bit more what sort of person is that from the photos, depending on what they want to put up. You know, they're exhibiting what kind of person that is and what kind of work they're into, and so it's a very direct and creative platform to know, right, this sort of person is into this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of things they like, because that's what they're putting up on their Instagram.
Do you use any other social media platforms, or is it primarily Instagram?
Facebook, Instagram. Those are my main ones, but I know there's more like Pinterest, Twitter, depending. But
and do you target a particular person, or do you leave it for general consumption normally?
Sorry, could you say that again?
So for Instagram, for instance, do you target a particular person with Instagram or?
So whoever for example, the DOPs that I've worked with, I normally ask for their Instagrams because they showcase most of what they've worked on, and that way I can get to know more about their work. Obviously, a CV is great too, but it's more directly creative, and I can find out more about their work, and so. Sure. Yes, it's good. I mean, through Instagram, it's great. Yeah, it's picture, it's audio, it's audiovisual. Exactly.
Yeah. I was just going to tell the audience about a website which myself and 2 other women who are camera operators have set up in the last year that's called Women Behind the Camera. And it's a database of women working across all the grades in the camera department, as well as grips, lighting, DITs. And what's also come out of that is an Instagram feed, which has been fantastic. And I don't really do Instagram. The 2 other women have been really mainly driving this. But during the last year, there have been stories and sort of illustrations of how people got into the industry, and very, very specific information, a very useful sort of resource. So I would just say to anyone who's interested to get started, particularly if you're a woman, look at the feed for Women Behind the Camera, because there's masses of really hard information and tips and good advice on there. So that seemed to me a really positive way to use Instagram.
What's the website?
Women Behind the Camera.
Is there a Men Behind the Camera one too? Could be,
There's
right?
lots of them.
Can I say something about Lucy's your website is absolutely fantastic. On Death on the Nile, we've always struggled trying to find female lighting technicians, and myself and my gaffer took one look, and there they are, two of them there, and there's I don't know if Jen is here as well, but it was so easy. There's a CV, there's the work done. We interviewed, they came on test days, and it was just so simple, which before the website, it's just getting the names, just knowing, that is one thing about information on the web. If it is clearly and well presented, then you have access to information that you just wouldn't have in any other way.
That's really great to hear, and that's exactly what we were trying to do, is up the visibility, because there are lots of women out there, but it's making yourself visible in a way.
It's the same with a collective of female cinematographers that I'm a part of called Illuminatrix, which Vanessa White and Catherine Goldsmith, who are both DPs, set up. And there are about 50 of us on there. And there's Illuminatrix Rising as well for more up-and-coming female DPs. And it was mostly about being able to say, when people say, oh, I'd love to work with a female DP, but I just don't know any. It's about saying there are quite a lot of us, and here we are, and there's a lot of variety on there and some really beautiful work. So I hope it's upped exposure.
Yeah, something seemed to have happened about in the recent past, 5 years ago or so. I've tried to get females into the lighting department for years and years without much success. And all of a sudden, about 5 years ago, there's about 6 females, 6 brilliant girls that I work with who, the thing is initially, maybe not so much now, but initially, they'd almost have to work twice as hard to get to ground zero that a guy would just assume he would get there. But there are, I think my department's probably one of the last ones to integrate getting not just men in, but also women. And I think finally, we're just getting the ball rolling now. And there's some really great sparks out there. And it always amazes me, somebody, you meet, like I've got one girl, Izzy, who's, she's about this tall, loves schlepping lights, loves taking part in the set with the lighting crew. And I'm just amazed that, she really enjoys doing it. It's a delight to see, and we need more of this. We need to keep that growing.
I was going to say, I'm fascinated to hear people are getting so much work from Instagram. I feel quite old school going, oh, really? But one thing I always say to my students is there is nothing better than if I was to send off a CV to someone, what I always do is I call them first, because we get lots of CVs all the time. So my CV landing in their inbox, they need to have my voice attached to it. So if you call someone, I always say, the first thing you should always ask is it convenient to talk? You don't want to hit someone and bombard them with information, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And generally, we love what we do, so we're happy to talk. And then I would send my CV to that person, wait a couple of days, and then call them up and say, did you get my CV? Now, I know they got my CV, but it gives me an opportunity to then have another conversation with them going, what did you think about it? And again, I'm building up a relationship with that person. So my worry is that it's really easy to hide behind technology these days. Send an email, send something on Instagram, have a virtual chat. But at the end of the day, it's your personality, you is the people I'm interested in, and when we're on a film set, we work with each other for a really long time, probably see each other more than we might see our families. So it's those relationships that are really important. So kind of, I always say, be bold, get out your comfort zone, pick up the phone and have a conversation, because I think that might get you further. Personally, that's how I've scored quite a few jobs.
Yeah, and one stage further than that, I was greeted with a certain amount of horror a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying to the graduates, why don't you just actually go there? And people were looking at me like, well, what do you mean? And I said, go there, go to the company, knock on the door, go to reception, say hi, give them your CV, and tell them you've sent them an email with a copy of the CV as well. So going there, physical presence is, I think, even beyond, phone call, great, going there even better, and be prepared for rejection. I've worked with several actors and asked them the question, how do you feel when you go for an audition and you get rejected? And they just look at you and go, it's all good practice. So that's what it is. It's good practice. Yes, there's a question up there. Can somebody give that gent the microphone? Thank you. One that works, maybe.
Hear me? Oh, yeah, no. So what I've heard as well is that people write emails or call second ACs like out of the cold without knowing them and ask them for trainee positions to get started in the industry. So I personally think it might be a bit creepy to call someone you don't know and be like, hi, can I work for you?
Creepy.
So let's talk about the camera department. If you want to get your first foot in the camera department, I made, although it worked for me, the people that you have to write to are clapper loaders and focus pullers. We're hopefully the people that get to decide who that trainee is. We are the people that have to work with you. So you, rather than going for big DOPs, with hopefully the ones, and we fight quite hard to make that decision. So yeah, you need to get to know me. So how are you going to do that? Either you've got to blag your way into Panavision under the premise of going to the camera store and then take a deviation into every test room to say, hi, I'm a camera trainee, here's my CV. I tell all of my trainees, all of my students who are hopefully here today to have a business card in their back pocket, because you can come and talk to me and I'll say hi and you can tell me your name, but if you hand me a piece of paper, a business card, I actually physically have to do something with that. That goes in my pocket, and then when I go home and wash my jeans, it has to come out of my pocket and I look at it again. And then if somebody calls me saying, we've got a job, I'm like, oh, I have a business card that's been lying here for ages because I don't know what to do with it. So yes, I would strongly say call people up. You've got to get out your comfort zone, because nobody is going to call you unless, and I get sent an awful lot of CVs, and also I reject. And if you send me a generic CV that says, dear madam, I would like to work in the film business, blah, 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 I don't even respond to those. But if you send me a personalized CV with my name at the top of it, I will always try and get back to you. I really like people who are passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about, and I really enjoy training people and giving people that foot into the industry that someone gave me. So as long as you ask that person, first of all, is it convenient to talk? And if it isn't, they'll tell you, then I would say yes. Talk to that person.
The other thing I'd add to all that is that if you're deciding what to put on your CV, just remember that every single one of you is unique, okay? And that is your strength. That's actually your strength, because you don't have any competition, right? Be the best you can be rather than try to be somebody else, right? Because nobody can be you, okay? Now, how do you make yourself stand out? I mean, I get 2 CVs a week probably from people, and they say exactly the same thing. I make great coffee, I'm committed, I've got a clean driving license, yada yada, right? And that's probably all true, but I can't tell one person from the next. Okay, so what I'd say to you is do your homework. One really potent way of making yourself stand out is to visit people that are innovating. You know, and that might be a piece of equipment, or it might be a technique, or whatever it is. Speak to them and ask for training, right? That's a really important thing, okay? If you ask for training, what you will do is you'll build up a portfolio of things that only you and that innovator knows about in the world, okay? And that's something that you can put on your CV. Imagine you're approaching Lou and you're saying, I don't know, I know, and I've had training on iCubed that Cook are developing, and I know how to program lenses so that all the metadata goes through to post-production. Now, Lou is probably sat in a test room shooting checkerboard grids for days and days and days, and you're saying to her, well, actually, I know how to program the lenses so that all that metadata is embedded in the lens. You don't need to do checkerboards anymore. You know, she's going to take notice, isn't she? Right? So that's something you can put on your CV, and she will take notice of that. So scour the internet, go to shows, call people, do your homework, go and visit people, you know, and get your knowledge base up. Guy at the back there wants to ask a question.
Hi, I'm Gabriel. With this regard, I wanted to know, how much would you value personal projects? So say someone has like, I don't want to say a good reel, but someone like, where would you think the right balance of like working on a proper set and then working on personal project is?
One thing I would say is you need to know what you want to do. So I think Oliver was great. He coined the phrase clap a lighter. If you're applying to me to be a camera trainee, don't write camera trainee /focus puller /DOP. Tailor your CV for what you want to do specifically, because if you've got more loading credits than I have, I'm very unlikely to give you a job as a camera trainee on something I'm working on. Andrei?
Yeah, I did a lecture once at BAFTA, and there was a student who he was actually a comedian, and he'd written his own material, he'd promoted it, he'd produced his own DVDs, he distributed them. I mean, he was basically a one-man production company, and I said, and with his own money, right? So I said to the guy, and he was looking to get into production, I said to him, you know, is any of this on your CV? And he said, no, there wasn't any room on the 2 pages that he was told to write. This guy was a walking, talking production house in himself, right? And that to me showed incredible commitment. He was doing it with his own money. So I would say, yeah, by all means.
Thank you.
So I think there's an important thing in this question is that we have something now called one-man band shooting. Now that didn't exist 15 years ago, right? So you had to move to digital before that could exist. So what it's doing now is there's the equivalent of sort of the wedding photographer in film, and it's the one-man band guy who's in a hotel room with a suitcase and a 5D and some sound and an editing laptop, goes to Milan, shoots a fashion show, cuts it that night, hands it in the next morning, goes home. Now, that's a job, sure, but it's a lonely job, and it's not a team job. And it is very important, and this is actually weirdly the sort of next theme I'd like to talk about, is it's very important to understand that today's film industry, you can get sidelined in this slightly odd world of super low budget, tiny crew, one-man band shooting, or like three-man band. And it's up to you to guide your career. And if you're in that spot, you know, of doing that kind of thing, and you want to get out of it, you have to make a strategy for getting out of it. And as you were saying earlier, I mean, there is a strategy where you apply for somewhere like the NFTS, and we do get applications from people who are in the business, but they're in that bit of the business, and they're marooned there, and they can't get out of it. And then they use film school of one sort or another as a stepping stone to say, right, enough of that. But you have to burn bridges to move in your career, don't you? To move from one place to another often means like burning down the bridge and going, help, and you may get no work for a while, but you will move on. So I think that's part of the question you were asking, I hope. Yeah. So, yeah, and then we'll go.
I just wanted to say something about the burning bridges. When I was, when Vanessa White encouraged me to apply to film school, I was like, oh no. And I was on a film as a camera trainee, and the crew was so lovely. And I assumed, without talking to them, that they'd be really upset. And so I had to go for an interview, and I had to lie. So I don't know what I made up. Either I was ill, someone had died, went for the interview, and then got to the next stage, which was a 3-day selection workshop, which at that point I couldn't, some 3 days, you're not ill for 3 days in the film industry, and somebody, has to be serious if you have to take 3 days off for a death. So I told them, and they were absolutely lovely to me. It was David Tattersall, who was the DP. He gave me loads of lighting tips. He said, always have backlight, doesn't matter. Just simple things that helped me because I had no idea what I was doing. And then when I got in, I was still on the film, and they gave me, as a camera crew, they gave me a light meter and a pan glass to say sort of congratulations and thank you. So don't be afraid. When I start on a job, on a long job, I always say to my crew, what is it that you're interested in? And if they say, oh, I'd like to focus pull, or I'd like to operate, or I'd like to be a DP, I try and support them in that as well. It's, it's nice working with creative people. And I always say, if you see something, I'm lighting and I'm operating, I'm quite busy. If you see something that you think maybe we should shoot and we've got time, tell me, because we'll do it, and that's nice for everybody.
Oliver, just a quick... I think basically what we're trying to say with all of this is that we all have an ambition, and it's something an interest that make us the person we are and what we want to achieve. But it is important to keep in mind when you're applying for a specific position that you have aimed your direction at kind of showing how committed you are to that position, how well trained you are in that position, and why you would be valuable in that position. To then have a paragraph, or I always say do a cover letter, which explains a little bit more about who you are and what you hope to achieve. I think all that does is, in my old-fashioned paper world, away from Instagram, it just paints a more clear picture of who you are. Now, in all of that, being concise and being precise and doing things in 1 or 2 pages, again, we don't, unfortunately, have too much time to read a book about every applicant. So kind of be precise and know, as Lou is saying, what you're applying for, really.
So, yeah, a question at the back there.
James Alexander Barnett. I'm a cinematographer from Wolverhampton in the West Midlands, as you can probably tell. So I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because I've been doing this now for about 15 years, and I found that I'm sort of a bit stuck in a rut. For about 10 years or so, I just sort of didn't really have any direction and just did corporate work and just sort of point and shoot sort of stuff. And then over time, I've sort of had a bit more ambition. Now I want to break into drama, and I'm finding it really difficult to make that transition out of corporate into the drama world. I've got involved with lots of short films in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's been quite good. But you always find that you're working with inexperienced directors, and they'll get you'll say to them, "Is this the location?" They're like, "Yeah." Well, it's just blank walls. It's like, what do I need to do in that space? So it's like sometimes it works out well. I've got a young family now as well, so it's like trying to step away and cut off the money is really difficult. So I just wondered if you had any advice. Do I take a step back and become an AC for a while, or?
I'm gonna talk about something which I don't think many of us talk about. A lot of us have sidelines that we do. I'm going to say as a second AC, I've met an awful lot of people in the industry. It's kind of like we work in this, and when we're not doing that, we do something else. So that's not, unfortunately, I can't help you. Maybe Harris can talk about moving more into drama, but as a second AC, I designed a new version of a clapperboard. It just kind of got me pocket money, but it kind of kept things rolling. So fingers in lots of pies, I would say to that. Anyone else want to admit to?
Yes, I would like to add something. I feel we're getting a little too serious here, guys. Let me tell you a little story. About 8 years ago, about now, I was asked by the main workshop to come, and I teach there sometimes, you know, cinematography, lighting, and so forth. They called me on a Sunday or Saturday, and they said, can you please come in Monday because we need a teacher for the class. And I said, sure, I'm available, and I like going up there, so it was a great atmosphere. So I got there, and on Sunday night, they came and they gave me the curriculum for the week. And I was totally, I've done lighting classes there before, so I thought I'm gonna light something. And they said, no, it's a little different. What you're teaching the next week is the Canon 300. And I said, oh my God, I've never worked with that camera, and I really, you know, I've seen it from afar, and to me it seems kind of mysterious. So I got the manual that night and went through the manual. It really didn't really connect with me at all. So the next morning there were 8 students there who had paid $3,500 to be there for the week. And they said, and I said to them, I said, you know, I got to confess, I have no idea what this camera is all about. I know you came here to learn more about that camera, but I can I can teach you about lighting, and I can teach you about framing. And I said, but let me ask you, because who are you, right? Why do you come here just for that camera? And they said, oh, we are all wedding photographers, or wedding videographers, right? You would call it. And I said, oh, really? So I felt even more guilty, because I thought, there are these fellows, and they're paying $3,500 plus the trip, plus that. It's out there $5,000-6,000 for the week, right? Anyway, we started the class. We had a wonderful time. They asked me a million questions about this, about that, and so forth. And then somewhere in the middle of the course, we got a little bit more closer to each other. We had a few lunches. I said, now tell me, how does this work? I mean, how can you afford this thing? And they said, what do you mean, how can we afford this thing? I said, well, you know, you're doing a videography of a wedding. What can that be? You make $300, $400? I said, oh, no. 15,000 minimum, up to $30,000, right? For a wedding. Now, of course, they bring a drone, and they get that shot, and they do this and do that, and they spend a half day putting it together, right? So I felt a little bit more relief, because at least they weren't poor people. And then, of course, came the question, and I said, why are you shooting with this camera? Because, you know, it's a beautiful camera, but it has certain limitations, because I was showing them certain lighting, darkness, and stuff like that, and the camera wasn't really cutting that. And they said, well, that's what B&H offers us, and, you know, that's what we buy. And we got to talk about all of these things. 2 weeks later, one called me, and he says, I bought an Alexa, and I'm going to shoot commercials. He's a top commercial cameraman right now in the United States. So the reason I'm telling you this is that opportunity is always there, you know. Don't be too serious about it. I mean, just grab your opportunity, and the opportunities come because you are there as a person, and you step in at the right time. So be an opportunist on that.
I hope that helps a bit. I think it does. And also, you said something very crucial when you were asking that question, that you are shooting shorts. Yeah, if you...
Tried to do a few in the last 3 or 4 years, just because I wanted people to see that I've done narrative work, really.
Yeah, but don't forget that director that you meet shooting shorts that you think, you know, doesn't know what they're doing, might be the next Spielberg. Yeah, I mean, you just never know who you're working with. So the important thing is to get out of, like, here's me on my own, and just grab anyone you can who wants to make drama at whatever budget level.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, maybe, you know, approach your local theatre maybe. There might be directors there who've got scripts or whatever that would value your input to help turn their script not into a play but into a film, a short film, until you build up, if you like, that trust, or you can demonstrate trust to somebody that you might want to work for in the future. There's no wasted energy in the universe, you know, so all of that input that you put into it, that energy you put into it, won't be wasted.
I was going to just say, it is true, though, that probably all of us have had to do that thing of working for free when we're trying to move up a grade, and it's very tough, and in a way you have to have a bit of money put away if you can to get you through that period of life when you're trying to make your move to the next step up. So I would have thought we've all done it.
So who in the room works for free? Put your hand up if you work for free. Wow. Yeah, so it's not good, is it? I mean, there have been many studies done showing that the work for free is just encouraging like a middle-class circle, because obviously if you don't have money, you can't work for free. But working for free is inevitable, is with us. And personally, I think it has a place, but I also think you don't want to stay there very long. It's not a topic I really want to go into because it's very political, but I think working for free is okay up to a point, and you should move on when the first time you can say, no, I'm charging you 200 quid, you should say that, that's all. Okay, yeah. Barbara. She's a first year, she's talkative.
I'll try to not make it too long. I wanted to say something about that because a friend of mine, talking about money and charging for yourself, I, for a long time, did a lot of stuff for very little money and going oh, I want to do this short film and it's a really great story and working for free. And then the moment I sort of went, you know what, I'm going to rate myself at a certain level and say, this is my day rate. Suddenly I started to get more work because I was charging more and people were sort of much more respectful towards me, and they started to be like, oh, okay, we'll try to get that money together for you, and they kind of saw me as being better at my job, even though I hadn't changed what I was doing, but I was making more money and people saw me as better at what I do. So I just wanted to put that in the room to everyone who's working for free. Just start charging money and start believing that you deserve that money as well, because it's really worth it.
Yeah, there's a famous story from Notting Hill where there was a shop that was closing, a clothes shop, and it had sale in the window, half price this. And the woman who ran the shop had a friend. He came in on Friday. He said, why are you closing? And she said, well, I can't make the shop make money. And he said, do me a favor. I want you to triple the price of everything in your window, take all the for sale signs down, and open it from Monday to Friday next week, and the shop is still there today, 2 years later. And that's all she did, triple the price. And then all those, Americans in Notting Hill went, oh, that must be great, it's really expensive. So, yeah, good tip, thank you. So I think at this point we'll just open the floor to any questions on any subject, because we have to get out of here fairly soon. Yes, sir? This gentleman with the hat there, thank you.
So yeah, I just want to talk about, for everyone on the stage, about the relationship you have with the directors you work with and what more or less clicks with a successful collaboration.
I don't have a relationship with a director.
Me either.
My director of photography has a relationship with my director. If my director's happy, my DOP is happy. I feed them both.
Taste, I think, and if you really like each other, you spend loads of time with each other. And if you have the same basic aesthetic, you're always going to disagree on, certain things. But if you mostly like the same films, if you mostly like the same painters and photographers, if you mostly like the same books, it's good if you have a few differing opinions, because a little bit of fight makes for better work, I think. But I think the directors I've really enjoyed working with and I've worked with repeatedly are ones that I'm not only become very good mates with because we enjoy hanging out, but also we have a shared aesthetic.
I was going to say, and maybe we'll have the same experience because we do the same thing, but as a camera operator you have an interesting position because there's a kind of triangular thing going on with a director, a DOP and a camera operator, and as a camera operator you're there and you're listening and you can suggest and offer up ideas, but you're also you have to take a step back quite often, and occasionally you end up in a situation where you have the director saying one thing and the DOP saying something different as well. So you're a supreme kind of diplomat in a way, and your own ideas as well quite often have to be sort of slightly suppressed unless someone else hasn't got a clue of what they're doing. In a way, is that?
Then you have to be diplomatic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're a proxy in the sense that your relationship with the director is via your director of photography. So the way I approach it is, particularly with the English system, the director will talk to you about a sequence and a shot and what have you, but I always sort of reference the DOP and make sure the DOP has either sanctioned it or sometimes it might be the DOP's idea that the director relays it to you. So you have to keep that sort of dialogue going. And if you do find yourself in that sort of position where you're piggy in the middle, in between the director and the DOP, I always go and speak to the DOP, or these days I say, does the DOP know this? Or if it's implicit that the director is asking you to do that, you know, that thing that the DOP has asked you not to do. These days I say, I'm sorry, but, you know, just have a quick chat with him or her, the DOP, just to make sure that I'm on the right path. And I actually say, you know, because I don't want to be in the middle of you two. I know that he or she has asked for this or that, and I don't want to be caught in the middle because I'll upset one of you. So would you mind just having that conversation? The other way I do it is to have all of us there together. So you're getting it directly from the horse's mouth from the director, and the DOP is there as well. So if the DOP doesn't want to do it or whatever, then the director hears it directly rather than from me. But it can be tricky. You know, there's no doubt about it.
Maybe Harris and Kees, do you want to talk about like long-term relationship with the DP, with the director, and how you keep that going or don't?
Yes, I can speak to that. First, whether it's for one movie or for 10 movies with a director, collaboration is equally important, and that's what I think is your first responsibility as a director of photography, working with a director. Now, sometimes you work with a director once, and after that you don't. Not necessarily because you don't like each other, just because schedules don't work out or, you know, tastes change. But I've been fortunate enough that I've had about 3 directors during my career that I did multiple movies with. It's wonderful once you come back with another story with the same person and you really communicate well. It sort of enriches every movie that you do together because you start to learn each other, you start to learn each other's sensibilities. And so that's really a wonderful thing if you can keep working with somebody. And so that's great. I mean, if you can do that, I would absolutely advise you to do anything you can to repeat your work with a specific director. It's always good.
I kind of agree. I've worked with one director now about, I think we're on our 9th film, and there is something about repeat collaborations. And I just want to diverse a little bit in that that's how I feel about my crew often. That trickles down to keeping a relationship with a crew and pushing each other to something better each time. I think that's one of the good things of familiarity, is knowing how far to push limits and kind of progress.
Yeah, just before that question, so I would just say I've also had, serial director relationships that mostly last 10 to 12 years on average. There's been sort of 3 important ones. And it's also worth figuring out when to stop. And one director, Stephen Frears, that I worked with for about 13, 12 years, I once heard a rumor that when somebody said to him, I think at some event, a bit like this, said to him, "Why don't you work with Oliver Stapleton anymore?" And he said, well, he knew what I wanted before I did. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's actually fair comment, because we'd done 8 or 9 films, and it did feel like the right time to stop and move on. So, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes a DP will work with a director for 20, 25 years. But if you all look up your favorite DPs on the jolly old IMDb, I think you'll find that just about all of the really good ones spend a lot of time with one director. It's very, very common because it's a team thing, it's a collaboration, and basically it's a marriage. And when you really settle in to that relationship, it's invaluable when you turn up on day one, on the 3rd movie, the 4th movie. You don't have to go through all that doubt and all that dancing around. You just get on with the work. So, yes, at the back.
Hey. I'm actually one of those, 30K wedding filmmakers, and I'm moving towards
30K wedding filmmaker. Right, you're doing all right.
Do you do funerals as well?
Hey, maybe. So I'm wanting to move into directing and cinematography. Do you have any advice on whether you should really just sort of choose a particular path, whether you just want to be a director or just a cinematographer?
Yeah, choose one of those.
Yeah, but would you think it's good to do some cinematography as well to make you a better director, or would you just keep them completely separate?
You have to kind of realize that directing comes in many different ways. I've worked very successfully with a director that came from Broadway, had never seen a movie camera in his life, and but was a very intelligent guy who knew what he wanted. And we deciphered it. We brought it together, and we eventually put it down on film. It was a very successful movie. So I'm giving you as an example that you can work with a director like that, who needs a lot of support from you to get to that end product, or you work with a director that walks in the door and on the first day says 35 millimeter here, 20 inches from the ground. Go do it, right? And that exists too. And it's between that extreme that our careers take place, and you have to kind of be recognizing that, I think.
I think you've actually answered your own question, because director is a vocation, not a career choice. So if you're thinking it's a choice, you should be a DP. Simple as that, really. Directors are crazy people. It's a 7-day-a-week, 365 days of the year. It's not really a choice. It's like an artist, like someone who's so drawn and so crazy they want to be a film director. But if you're thinking it's a choice, in my opinion, rather be a DP.
The other big difference, because we're talking about difference between director of photography or director, we do a lot more. We'll end up with, 80, 60 credits in our lifetime. There's very few directors, especially today, that get above 4 or 5 movies in their lifetime. So you automatically are more a conduit to completing the project, I find often. And especially when you get a comment like that, like you always did something before I could even think about it, that describes a little bit the role, right?
Yeah. Okay, I think we're getting towards the end, but is there any last question? Okay, thank you. Microphone for this gentleman. Do you want one of ours? Quicker route.
It's just a quick question, going back to a previous topic. Have any of you received legible handwritten CVs and covering letters, and how did you respond to those?
What's handwriting?
I once got a CV from a kid that turned up in the post rather than email, and it was a typed CV, and inside the letter was a packet of Hubba Bubba, and he said, "Here's something for you to chew it over with." And I was doing dailies on Downton Abbey, and I tried so hard to get this kid in, but he was busy because everyone had the same thing. It was genius. And I used to send a CV out with like a tea bag in the corner, stapled to it, going, "Why don't you have a cup of tea whilst you look it over?" Kind of, it was different.
So yeah, handwritten. Anybody get any handwritten stuff?
Never. No.
Never. But it's a good idea, though, as long as you can read the writing. Those stories are very important, that if you are looking for work, just try and do something different to what everybody else does. You know, come up with the tea bag or the bubble gum or whatever. I think that's all great. Yes, there's a question down there on the floor. Yeah, here it comes. Right-hand side, incoming.
Hi. For students that have just come out of film school, do you, if they're applying for entry-level jobs in film, do you expect a show reel? And if you do, what would you like to see in them?
What kind of job are you trying to get?
Entry-level job.
Well, what's an entry-level job? You mean like as a second AC?
Yeah.
No, show reel, no. No, show reels are for cinematographers. Yeah, you can have a show reel of a slate maybe, but yeah. But no. Show reels are very much operated cinematographers, focus pullers, second ACs, no show reel, because people will immediately think, oh, you want to be a DP, and that's not what you're looking for. But what Lou's talking about, you know, contact the next level up, because when someone says to me, who's your crew, I'll name the operator, but then I'll tell the operator to, you know, bring your crew. So I don't have much to do with who the rest of the crew are, because that should be, the operator needs to feel comfortable with their crew. So if you want to be at the bottom, contact the next people up from that, I'd say, right?
One of my students was really worried because we were doing some work on CVs, and he said, but I've only worked with the same person. And I was like, that's brilliant, because what worries me more is when I see CVs from people who've never worked with the same person twice. If you've worked with the same person, it shows that you get on well with someone. If you're applying for entry-level jobs and you get work experience, make sure you write the names of the clapper loader and the first AC, because the first thing I would do if I was going to offer you a job is look down your CV and see if I recognize any of those two names, and then I would call them up for a reference. So the more names in my department you can have on your CV, the better. Don't just put DOP and director. I don't need to know the director. DOP, focus puller, camera assistant, the job and what camera you were working on, and try and I think you can fit more information on a CV sometimes if you go landscape, so don't be afraid to do that. With a tea bag.
Slightly on a tangent, I just wondered if it's worth mentioning the Mark Milsom Foundation, who have a scheme that's called Foot in the Door. So I think they're in contact with a lot of the film schools up and down the land, like 8 or 9 film schools. They have contacts with them. But if any of you don't know about the scheme, it's worth looking up the Mark Milsom Foundation, where they do some mentoring schemes, and they also, I think, take on a couple of trainees every now and again. So it's just another...
Yeah, there is also a mentoring program at Screen Skills, which is worth looking at. If there's a specific person you would like as a mentor, just have a coffee with, you can apply online to Screen Skills, say what you're looking for. And that actually can be quite useful, even for people who are already in the business, who are trying to like hop a grade or change from one thing to another. It just gives you an opportunity to speak to somebody experienced. Okay, we better make this the last question from over there.
Hello. Yeah. When you were starting out, did any of you have to overcome like an internal struggle? So like self-doubt, for example.
Still do. Every day.
Every day.
All the time.
Yeah. We've all got something to say about that. Yeah, lack of confidence and self-doubt's your biggest enemy, I think. Certainly was mine. You have the problem as a generation, when I say you know, people under about 35, 40, because your self-doubt is spread all over the goddamn internet, whereas our self-doubt was sort of in the room. And so I think it was easier for us because the self-doubt was kind of more private. So what I would encourage you to do is take Instagram holidays once a week. Do not look at it every day. You know, do not get obsessed with comparing yourself to other people. In fact, I would say never compare yourself to other people, but it takes a lifetime to achieve that. You know, I hear the word Roger Deakins a lot in my life. I even entitled a lecture once, which was called How I'm Not Roger Deakins. So, you know, you have to get over it. Yeah. So, yes, but Judi Dench, I did a film with her, and she said to me, every day of her life, she's terrified. Terrified in front of the camera, terrified going on stage, and that adrenaline, that self-doubt, that, like, panic, that's what fuels creative people. And eventually you kind of learn that it's actually part of your landscape of how you are every day. And so you use it for positivity, not to kind of go, I'm useless. But it is normal to feel I'm useless. So don't worry, you have a lot of friends in the room. So
I think they say if you want to meet the person who's going to make the biggest change in your life, you should look in the mirror. And I think also sometimes it's worth saying if you want to see the person who holds you back the most in your life, you should look in the mirror too. So absolutely.
Okay, I think we're going to get thrown out now. So I just want to thank, actually, I want to thank all the people around, you know, who are filming this and who put all this together, the BSC, Audra, and the whole crew, because this is how all this happens. It's about 3 people who organized the whole thing. It's actually more than that, but it is fantastic, this event, and so I want to thank them. And then thank you very much, this eclectic, strange group of people being on the stage together. It's been lovely. Thank you.